Kapunda sits in the middle of South Australia, the way a lot of small towns do, quietly, without announcement. Copper pulled this town out of the ground in the 19th century, and what it left behind was a community of about 3,000 people who had grown comfortable in its stillness. The kind of place where nobody locks their front door, where a familiar car on the street means a neighbor, not a stranger, where the worst thing that ever happened before November 2010 was someone setting fire to a 7-meter statue of a miner outside of town. That changed in a single night. On the morning of November 8th, 2010, a person passing a house on Harriet Street saw something that did not make sense, something that stopped them completely. They called emergency services at 11 in the morning, and what police found when they arrived inside that house would be described by the lead detective as something no horror film could replicate. 3 members of the same family were dead. 16-year-old Chantel Rowe, her father Andrew, who was 45, her mother Rose, 44. Every room in the house carried what had happened in it. Every wall, every floor. The blood had gone everywhere through every part of that home, from the front door straight through to the back. And the wounds on all 3 of them were not the result of a quick single event. They spoke of something prolonged, something personal, something that most people in a town like Kapunda would never have thought possible. Andrew Rowe was the kind of man who gave his time freely. He worked hard, showed up when people needed him, and did not ask for much in return. Rose was the energy of that family. Her son Christopher, who was 24 at the time, would later describe her as someone who could make a room laugh without even trying. She was the one who fixed things around the house, who showed her children how to use their hands, who made it impossible to be bored in her presence. Chantel, at 16, had that same lightness about her. A friend said she turned almost everything into a joke and rarely let anything anyone said stick to her. She was already making plans. She wanted to turn 18 so she could go out and have fun with Christopher. He had been planning to teach her to drive. Christopher was not in Kapunda that week. He had been in Queensland with his fiancée and her family. As fragments of news began filtering online, he saw enough of the coverage to recognize the street. He went to Facebook and posted asking if anyone could tell him what was happening, that it looked like his parents' street, that he could not reach any of them. Someone replied and told him not to worry, that everything was fine. That person had genuinely checked, but on the wrong house. Christopher would learn the truth not long after that. There is something particularly cruel about that sequence of events. The moment between thinking your family is safe and knowing they are not. Some things cannot be softened no matter how carefully the words are chosen. The investigation that opened up in the hours and days that followed was unlike anything Kapunda had ever seen. Over 100 police officers and volunteers moved through the town. Every park, every stretch of bush, rubbish dumps miles outside the town limits, all of it was being searched. Police knocked on approximately 300 homes across 100 streets. The Water Operations Unit was brought in. The Major Crimes Unit began logging calls from the public, and they received nearly 100 through Crime Stoppers alone. Markers were placed on what appeared to be blood traces leading away from the house on Harriet Street. The person or people responsible would almost certainly be carrying injuries. There was a Toyota Land Cruiser that had been parked outside the home that investigators wanted to trace. Kiki. A neighbor had heard Rose scream for help 3 times just after 1 in the morning. That same neighbor heard what sounded like a body hitting the floor, then Andrew's voice, and then nothing at all. Silence where a family used to be. The autopsies confirmed the full extent of what had happened to each of them. Chantel had been stabbed at least 33 times. She had been sexually assaulted. She had been disemboweled. Her clothes had been torn from her, and at some point during that night, she had been redressed. Andrew was found in the kitchen with close to 30 stab wounds. Rose was found only a few meters from him with at least 50. She had been attacked twice, once while she was upright, and once while she was on her hands and knees trying to crawl away. At least one of the knives used had come from the family's own kitchen. Fragments of blades were recovered from inside Andrew and Rose's bodies. All 3 of them had fought. That was clear. The scene made that clear. Whatever fight they were able to put up had not been enough. The forensic challenge was enormous. 3 victims across every room of the house meant that separating what belonged to the crime from what had simply accumulated through ordinary life was extraordinarily difficult. Every surface held biological material: hair, skin cells, saliva. The key was not finding DNA. The key was finding DNA that mattered. And for a while, nothing that came back from the system matched anything. Eventually, a male DNA profile was extracted, along with fingerprints, from the back of Chantel's bedroom door. That detail mattered. Today, the placement of those prints pointed toward who the first target had been and why. The sexual assault and the location of those prints together indicated that Chantel had been the focus. The attack appeared to have started with her. But whoever left that profile behind was not in the national database, not among the 500,000 profiles stored on record. So investigators turned to asking people directly. They began approaching male youth connected to the family, requesting voluntary swabs and fingerprint samples. Men throughout Kapunda came forward willingly. The logic was simple and the community understood it. If you had nothing to hide, you gave a sample, and your name came off the list. That quiet pressure moved through the town, person by person by person. Police had also been piecing together the days immediately before the murders. They learned that just before she was killed, Chantel had hosted a small gathering at the house. Her parents had been away for the night. It had been low-key. Some snacks, drinks, films. Everyone who attended was tracked down and spoke openly with investigators. All of them were ruled out. Chantel's boyfriend Dylan had texted her at around 5:30 on the morning she was killed, just checking in because she had been feeling unwell the day before. He never received a reply he could read. But phone data showed that a message had been sent from her phone back to him. The message itself was never recovered. Chantel was already dead by that time. The person who sent that message had not been her. One name surfaced during the investigation that had not been at the gathering: Jason Alexander Downey, 18 years old. He had moved to Kapunda from Scotland at the age of 14 when his mother and stepfather relocated. He had attended the same high school as Chantel. He knew Dylan. He had been part of the same social circle for a while. When investigators spoke with Jason, the first thing that stood out was that he immediately offered an alibi. Nobody had asked him for one yet. He also had deep, painful-looking cuts across the palm of his hand. He said he had fallen off his bike. Jason was described by people who knew him as someone who kept to himself, who often exaggerated things about himself in a way that put people off, who had few real friendships. His colleagues at the mechanics workshop where he worked as an apprentice did not like him. Dylan, however, said Jason had never shown him any sign of aggression. He was quiet. He seemed easygoing. Dylan knew that Jason had feelings for Chantel, but he had not seen any reason to be concerned. He felt secure in his relationship with her. What had been happening below that surface was a different picture entirely. Jason had been contacting Chantel constantly, messages and calls, at all hours, confiding in her about his anxieties and insecurities. She answered because she did not want to create awkwardness within the group, but the contact had become something she was trying to manage. She had started pulling back. When she arranged the gathering at her house, she deliberately did not invite him. She had not told Dylan why, not wanting to cause friction. The night that Chantel and her parents were killed, Dylan had spoken to Jason. He mentioned, in passing, that Chantel was not feeling well and would be calling in sick the next day. He also mentioned that he would not be staying at her place that night. Jason now knew she would be home. He believed she would be home alone. When his DNA and fingerprints were submitted, the results came back within 2 days. Everything matched. The profile from the back of Chantel's bedroom door, the semen recovered from her body. All of it pointed to Jason Downey. He told investigators that he and Chantel had been involved in a consensual relationship months earlier. There was no evidence to support that claim. It also did not account for the physical evidence tied to the night of the murders. He was placed under arrest. His mother, Lorna, spoke about her son in terms that will sound familiar to anyone who has ever followed a case like this one. She described him as a happy, good-natured boy, said the charges were completely out of character, noted that he had never raised his voice, never threatened anyone, never shown violence. She said she would stand by him. The community, meanwhile, gathered to say goodbye to the Rowe family. Hundreds of people attended the funeral. Chantel's godmother stood up and said what everyone in that room was thinking, that none of it made any sense, that there was no explanation that could contain what had happened. The reconstruction of events placed Jason entering the house through a bathroom window, a conclusion supported by a footprint recovered at that location. He had known Dylan would not be there. Whether or not he believed Chantel's parents were home is a question that sits without a clean answer. His lawyer would later say that Jason had not gone there armed, that the knives used came from the kitchen, and that he had intended to confront Dylan rather than to hurt anyone. His lawyer also said he had not intended a sexual assault, though he had intended to pursue something physical with Chantel. Jason himself said the primary feeling driving him that night was jealousy, that he had thought something was building between him and Chantel. That when he understood she was with Dylan, he had not handled it. What actually happened inside that house, once he was inside, was something far beyond jealousy or rejection. Chantel was attacked first. She sustained wounds across her entire body. At one point, she crawled beneath her bed. Jason pulled her out and continued. He removed her clothing. He assaulted her as she was dying. Then he moved through the house to her parents. Rose and Andrew both fought him. He went back and forth between victims. When it was over, he attempted to clean up around Andrew's body, specifically her flag. Then he left. He slept in his car. The following morning, he went to work as normal. When the news about Harriet Street reached him at work, he left early. Grief, he told people. He took a few days off. He was photographed at a work Christmas function. A camera crew filming coverage of the aftermath captured him visiting the memorial that had been set up outside the family home. He left a teddy bear. He left a handwritten note for Chantel. He signed it with his full name. The weight of that image, a man standing at a memorial for the people he killed, writing out a message and leaving it there, is something that tends to stay with people who follow this case. It is not unusual in the way it might first appear. It is, in fact, a pattern that surfaces with uncomfortable regularity in cases involving obsession, the performance of grief, the insertion of the self into the mourning of others. It serves more than one purpose. Exactly a year after the Rowe family was killed, Jason Downey entered a guilty plea to 3 counts of murder via video link. He was cleared of the second rape charge. That appeared to be the end of the formal process. It was not. In early 2012, the director of public prosecutions raised concerns about the legitimacy of his plea. Letters that Jason had written to his mother from prison had emerged, and in those letters, he had been telling a different story entirely. He claimed he had been driving past Chantel's house and noticed blood on the walls. He said he went inside and found Andrew and Rose already dead. He said he found Chantel under the bed, alive, and that he put her in bed, that she had cuts everywhere, that she said the word help to him, and that she died while he was holding her. He described a man in dark clothing with a green bag as the actual killer. He said he had not called the police because he was afraid they would not believe him. The court entered a period of uncertainty. While this played out, investigators were not standing still. A USB drive belonging to Chantel was found in Jason's bedroom. Chantel's lanyard was found in his car. So were bloodstains belonging to Rose and Andrew. By March 2012, Jason appeared before the Supreme Court and confirmed his guilty plea again. He had spoken with a psychologist. He said he had spent months refusing to accept what he had done because it was that bad, and that he had finally arrived at the point of accepting it. He said he had wrecked the lives of everyone involved. He said if he could turn back time, he would. He described himself as not a good person, acknowledged he had problems he did not fully understand, and said he thought about that day and its consequences every day. His explanation for why it happened came down to jealousy. He said he had thought something was there between himself and Chantel. When he understood she was with Dylan, he got angry. He said he had nothing against her parents. He said everyone was a victim. He said the only person who was not a victim was himself. 30 relatives of the Rowe family submitted victim impact statements. About 50 people showed up to the sentencing hearing in support of Christopher, who had survived only because he had been out of town. Christopher had lost his parents and his sister in a single night. He had called her his best friend. He had been planning to teach her to drive. Jason Downey was sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 35 years. It was one of the longest such periods in South Australian history. The judge described what had happened as truly horrific. Outside the courtroom, the feeling among the Rowe family's supporters was that it was not enough. A cousin who spoke on Christopher's behalf said 35 years was not justice, that he should not be getting out at all. Christopher Rowe spoke in a way that was measured, even in the middle of everything. He said he could now start focusing his energy on keeping his mother, father, and Chantel's memories alive, that he could slowly try to find his own way through it. After sentencing, Jason wrote a letter. He apologized for his actions on November 8, 2010. He said the situation was eating him alive. He listed what he had lost: a career, a car, friends, his family. He said no sentence would ever be enough and that he deserved everything coming to him. The lead detective said afterward that the only real reason for the guilty plea had been a reduction in sentencing. That remorse had nothing to do with it. One detail surfaced after the sentencing that had circulated as a rumor almost from the beginning: a claim that Chantel had been pregnant when she was killed. It appeared in at least one published article. A journalist who had covered the case from the start tracked down the reporter responsible and asked where the information had come from. The answer was that they had thought it would be interesting. It was not true. It had not appeared in any hearing or in the autopsy. But once something like that is printed, it takes on a life of its own, and versions of it still circulate. The psychologist who assessed Jason spoke afterward about the community's instinct to classify someone capable of this kind of violence as a monster or as severely disturbed. The observation was that this instinct comes from a specific place, because the alternative is more comfortable. If an unremarkable person living an ordinary life in a small town can do this, then the categories people use to separate themselves from that kind of violence do not hold as firmly as most would prefer. That idea sits poorly with almost everyone who hears it, and perhaps that reaction itself is worth sitting with for a moment. Kapunda did not stay the same after November 2010. The doors that used to stay unlocked were locked. The easy trust that comes with years of nothing much happening had been broken and could not simply be restored. Remaining members of the Rowe family said that every milestone since then has been changed by what happened. Every birthday, every Christmas, every ordinary day that should have been shared with 3 people who are no longer there. Christopher Rowe, the last surviving member of his immediate family, framed justice in plain language at the sentencing. He said justice was supposed to be proportionate to the offense. He asked plainly for someone to explain to him where the proportionality was. He did not ask it in anger. He asked it as a person trying to understand something that may simply not be understandable. He said he would try to find his own way to survive through it, past it, not beyond it, not beyond it. Through it, that distinction is not a small one. Some losses do not have an other side. They become the terrain itself. What you learn slowly and without anyone to guide you is only how to keep moving inside them.